They say grief has a price tag. Mine was exactly $80,000 a year. That was the cost of keeping my granddaughter safe. That was the cost of keeping my promise to my dying daughter. For 6 years, I paid it without question. I thought I was a provider. I thought I was a protector. I was wrong. I was just a blind old fool with a checkbook. My name is Conrad Hallowell, and for 30 years I worked as a forensic auditor. I made a career out of finding the lies hidden inside numbers. I could look at a corporate ledger and tell you who was stealing, who was cheating, and who was desperate. But when it came to the monster living in my own daughter's house, I missed every single red flag. I missed them until a 10-year-old girl grabbed my sleeve in the middle of a blizzard and whispered 6 words that shattered my world. Grandpa, do not give him the money. Before I tell you what I found in the basement that night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight to protect the ones you love. The wipers of my Lincoln town car were fighting a losing battle against the nor'easter, slamming into Boston. Route 128 was a graveyard of white silence, the kind of weather that tells you to stay home, lock the doors, and sit by the fire. But today was the 6th anniversary of Sarah's death. And in my family duty does not care about the weather. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, feeling the arthritis ache in my hands. At 68, I should have been retired in Florida playing golf and complaining about the humidity. Instead, I was driving through a whiteout with a cashier's check for $80,000 burning a hole in my breast pocket. Every mile was a battle against the ice, but I kept telling myself it was worth it. It was for Mia. She was the only piece of Sarah I had left. After Sarah passed, her husband Justin had played the grieving widower to perfection. He quit his job to take care of Mia full-time. He told me he wanted to give her the stability she needed. I believed him. I respected him. I volunteered to cover their living expenses, the mortgage, the private school tuition, the vacations. I wanted my granddaughter to have a magical childhood untouched by the financial reality of losing a mother. I was the bank, and I was happy to remain open for business. The GPS finally announced I had arrived. I pulled into the long, winding driveway of the colonial estate in Wellesley. I bought this house for them. It was a beautiful structure, majestic even in the storm, with warm yellow light spilling out from every window onto the snow. It looked like a Christmas card. It looked like a home. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The bags under my eyes were heavier than usual. I straightened my tie, patted the pocket with the check to make sure it was still there, and opened the car door. The wind hit me like the physical blow, freezing the air in my lungs. I marched to the front door, head down against the biting cold. Before I could even ring the bell, the heavy oak door swung open. Justin stood there, framed by the golden light of the foyer. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car, holding a glass of red wine. His smile was warm, practiced, and immediate. "Conrad," he exclaimed, rushing out in his socks to grab my arm. "You are insane for driving in this. I told you we could have done this next week. Come in before you freeze." He ushered me inside, and the sensory overload was instant. The house smelled of cinnamon and expensive pine candles. Jazz music was playing softly from hidden speakers. The heat was cranked up high, a stark contrast to the brutal freeze outside. It felt like walking onto a movie set. Justin took my heavy coat, shaking off the snow with the diligence of a devoted son-in-law. "I barely touched the driveway, Justin," I grumbled, rubbing my cold hands together. "You know I would not miss today." "Where is she?" "She is upstairs finishing her homework," Justin said, guiding me into the living room. He gestured to the Italian leather sofa. "Sit, please. Can I get you anything? Scotch. Or maybe some hot tea to warm you up." I sat down, my eyes scanning the room out of habit. My auditor's brain never really turned off. I noticed the new 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. I noticed the Persian rug that looked brand new. I noticed a sculpture on the side table that looked like a jagged piece of metal, but probably cost $5,000. Justin was living well. My money was being put to use. I told myself this was good. It meant Mia was living in comfort. It meant she was not lacking anything. I am fine, Justin, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. I did not want to drag this out. The roads were getting worse, and I wanted to see Mia give her my love and get back to the safety of my hotel. I pulled out the envelope. Justin saw it. For a split second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, the mask slipped. His eyes did not look at my face. They darted straight to the envelope in my hand. It was a hungry look, a desperate look. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a look of humble reluctance. Conrad, you know. You do not have to do this, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as if he were embarrassed. You have done so much for us already. I feel guilty taking this. Take it, I said firmly, placing the envelope on the marble coffee table. It is for Mia, for her school, for the house. You are doing the hard work, Justin. Raising a daughter alone is not easy. This is the least I can do. He sighed, picking up the envelope with both hands like it was a sacred relic. Thank you, Conrad. Truly, Sarah would be so happy to know you are looking out for us. I promise every cent goes to making sure Mia has the life Sarah wanted for her. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat at the mention of my daughter. I trusted him. Why would I not? He was the father of my grandchild. He was the man my daughter chose. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not the running, thumping footsteps of a 10-year-old girl. These were slow, measured, heavy steps. I turned around. Mia stood at the bottom of the grand staircase. She was wearing a velvet dress with a white lace collar. Her hair was braided perfectly, not a strand out of place. She looked like a porcelain doll, beautiful but stiff. Mia, honey. I smiled, opening my arms. Come here and give Grandpa a hug. She did not run, she walked, one foot in front of the other. Her eyes were fixed on me. They were Sarah's eyes, large, brown, and expressive. But today they looked different. There was no sparkle. There was no childhood joy. They looked wide, alert, and terrifyingly old. She reached me and stepped into my embrace. I wrapped my arms around her, expecting to feel the solid warmth of a healthy child. Instead, she felt fragile, rigid. She did not hug me back. Her arms hung by her sides. Hey, sweetie, I whispered, pulling back to look at her face. You look beautiful. Are you doing okay? Justin stepped in immediately, placing a hand on her shoulder. His grip looked firm. Too firm. She is just tired, Conrad, Justin said smoothly. She has been studying for her math finals all week. She wants to make you proud. Right, Mia? Mia nodded mechanically. Yes, Daddy. Something in my stomach turned over. A cold prickle of instinct that I had not felt since my days auditing corrupt corporations. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It was too perfect. Too rehearsed. Well, we have to celebrate, Justin announced, clapping his hands together. Conrad. I have a bottle of vintage Cabernet in the kitchen that I have been saving for a special occasion. I think your generosity tonight qualifies. Let me go open it and let it breathe. He gave Mia a pat on the head, a gesture that looked more like a warning than affection, and turned to walk toward the kitchen. I watched him go. I waited until he disappeared around the corner. I waited until I heard the sound of a cork popping. Then I turned back to Mia. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small red envelope. It was just $100 cash, a little secret gift I always gave her for ice cream or toys, something separate from the big check. Here, I whispered, winking at her, for you. Do not tell your dad. Mia did not take it. She did not even look at it. Her eyes darted to the kitchen doorway, then back to me. Her breathing hitched. Suddenly, the porcelain doll facade cracked. Her lip trembled. She leaned in close. I thought she was going to kiss my cheek. Instead, I felt her hot breath against my ear. Her voice was barely a breath, shaking with a terror that no 10-year-old should ever know. Grandpa, don't give him the money. I froze. My hand holding the red envelope hovered in the air. She gripped my sleeve, her fingernails digging into the fabric of my suit. She pulled me down closer, her eyes wide and pleading, filling with tears she was too scared to shed. He is not who you think he is, she whispered, the words rushing out. Follow him, not to the kitchen. When he leaves, follow him. You have to go to the basement. The basement? Why the basement? Mia, I started to ask, my voice rising in confusion. Shh, she hissed, her eyes widening in panic as we heard Justin's footsteps returning from the kitchen. She pushed me away violently and took a step back, smoothing her dress, just as Justin walked back into the room holding 2 crystal glasses of dark red wine. Everything okay here? Justin asked. His voice was light, but his eyes were sharp. He looked from me to Mia, scanning for any sign of rebellion. Mia stared at the floor. Yes, Daddy. Grandpa was just telling me he likes my dress. Justin smiled. That smile. It did not reach his eyes anymore. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in 6 years, and I realized I was not looking at a grieving father. I was looking at a man who was guarding a vault. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The check was already on the table. The transaction was done. But the auditor in me had just woken up. I forced a smile onto my face. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Yes, I said, my voice steady. It is a beautiful dress, Justin. You have impeccable taste. I took the wine glass he offered. I toasted to his health. I toasted to family. But inside, my blood was turning to ice. My granddaughter had just given me a mission, and Conrad Hallowell never leaves an audit unfinished. I needed an exit strategy. In the world of forensic auditing, you never let the target know they are under investigation until you have the smoking gun. If I stayed, if I pressed Mia for answers in front of him, Justin would shut down. He would coach her. He would hide the evidence. I needed him to think the old man was gone. I needed him to feel safe. Because men like Justin only make mistakes when they feel safe. I took a sip of the wine he had poured, and then I grimaced, pressing my hand against my sternum. I let out a sharp, ragged breath. It was a performance I had practiced in the mirror for moments just like this. The fragile senior citizen. The liability. Justin set his glass down immediately. Conrad, are you all right? Is it your heart? It is just the angina, I lied, my voice strained. The drive, the stress of the day. I think I need to lay down. My pills are back at the hotel. Justin's face twisted into a mask of concern, but I saw the relief behind it. He did not want me here. He wanted the $80,000, not the 68-year-old man attached to it. You should go, he said, already moving to help me up. Do not risk it, Conrad. The roads are only getting worse. Go to the hotel, take your medication, and sleep. We can catch up tomorrow when you are feeling better. I looked at Mia one last time. She was still standing by the stairs, her small hands gripping the banister so hard her knuckles were white. She did not say goodbye. She just nodded, a tiny, imperceptible movement that said, "Go." I will be waiting. I will call you in the morning, I told Justin as he walked me to the door. Drive safe, Conrad. Please. The heavy oak door slammed shut, and I heard the deadbolt slide home with a finality that made my skin crawl. I was outside. The wind was howling, tearing at my coat, but I did not feel the cold. I felt a burning, cold rage. I walked to my Lincoln, opened the door, and slumped into the driver's seat. I started the engine, turned on the headlights, and drove down the long driveway. I turned right, heading toward the main road. Anyone watching from the window would see red taillights disappearing into the storm. But I did not go to the hotel. 200 yards down the road, where a cluster of thick pines blocked the view from the house, I killed the lights. I pulled the car onto a maintenance access trail I had noticed years ago when I bought the property. It was covered in snow, but the Lincoln was heavy and it plowed through. I tucked the car behind a utility shed, invisible from the street, invisible from the house. Then I killed the engine. Silence rushed in, heavy and oppressive. The only sound was the wind buffeting the glass and the ticking of the cooling engine. I could not run the heater. Exhaust fumes would give me away. If I was going to do this, I had to do it cold. I reached into the glove compartment. I did not have a gun. I never believed in them. My weapon of choice was information. I pulled out a pair of high-power Nikon binoculars and a small leather-bound notebook. This was my kit. Simple. Effective. I sat there in the dark, the temperature inside the car dropping rapidly. My breath began to fog the air. My fingers, stiff with arthritis, gripped the binoculars. I focused the lenses on the house through the trees. The windows were glowing warm and yellow. It looked so peaceful, so inviting. It was the perfect camouflage for a crime scene. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My feet were beginning to go numb. The cold was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, but it kept me sharp. It kept me angry. I watched the silhouette of Justin move past the living room window. He was pacing. He was on the phone. I waited. In my line of work, patience is not a virtue. It is a necessity. Fraudsters always think they are smarter than the system. They think no one is watching. They think the old man drove away to take a nap. 20 minutes later, the garage door opened. I held my breath. The headlights of Justin's Range Rover cut through the snow. He pulled out fast, too fast for the weather. He was in a hurry. I watched him turn left, heading toward the city. He was leaving. He was leaving a 10-year-old girl alone in a blizzard on the anniversary of her mother's death. Perfect. I waited until his taillights faded completely. Then I opened my car door. The wind screamed at me, but I did not care. I had a key in my pocket, a key I had kept for 6 years, a key that Justin had forgotten about. The bank was closed. The auditor was coming in. The red taillights of Justin's Range Rover were swallowed by the white abyss of the storm. I gave him a 2-minute head start. I needed to be sure he was past the main gate, fully committed to his escape before I made my move. I checked my watch. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Time to go to work. I stepped out of my Lincoln. The wind hit me instantly, a physical wall of ice and noise, but I welcomed it. It sharpened my senses. I pulled my collar up and trudged through the snow, stepping carefully into the tire tracks Justin had just left to mask my own footprints. In my line of work, you learn that the smallest mistake can unravel the tightest case. I was not going to be the one who made a mistake tonight. I reached the front porch. The heavy oak door loomed in front of me. To anyone else, this was just a house. To me, it was an asset I had purchased 6 years ago. It was a shelter I had provided. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key. It was a simple brass key, cold against my fingers. I remembered the day I had this copy made. It was the day they moved in. Sarah had pressed it into my hand and said, "Dad, this is your house too. You never have to knock." I wondered if Justin had forgotten about this key, or if his arrogance just made him believe I would never have the courage to use it. That was the thing about con men. They always underestimated the quiet ones. They mistook silence for weakness. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warmth hit me first, but it felt different now. 10 minutes ago, with Justin playing the host, the house had felt cozy. Now in the silence, the heat felt stifling, artificial. The house was holding its breath. The jazz music had stopped. The fire in the hearth had died down to low embers casting long, dancing shadows across the expensive furniture. I closed the door behind me and locked it. I stood in the foyer listening. The silence was absolute. It was not the peaceful silence of a happy home. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vault. The smell of the pine candles was still there, but underneath it I could smell something else. Something stale. Something old. I moved through the living room. My footsteps on the hardwood floor sounded like gunshots to my anxious ears. I kept my hand in my pocket, gripping my phone ready to record, ready to call 911. My eyes swept the room. Without Justin standing there to distract me, the details jumped out. The photos on the mantel. I walked over to them. There was a picture of Justin and Mia from a vacation in Aspen. Justin was smiling, looking tanned and fit. Mia was looking away from the camera, her shoulders hunched. There was a picture of Justin receiving an award at his country club. There was a picture of Justin's new car. Where was Sarah? I scanned the entire room. There was not a single photograph of my daughter. Not one. It was as if she had been erased from the narrative of this house. The woman who had filled these rooms with laughter, whose life insurance policy had paid for that Italian leather sofa, was gone. A cold rage settled in my stomach, heavier than the fear. I turned away from the mantel and looked toward the hallway that led to the kitchen and the basement door. Mia's voice echoed in my head. "Grandpa, don't give him the money." The basement. I walked toward the door at the end of the hall. It was a standard white door, identical to the pantry door next to it. But as I got closer, I noticed the handle. It was a heavy-duty locking knob, the kind you see on exterior doors, not interior ones. And there was a deadbolt installed above it. A deadbolt on a basement door. Why would you need to lock the basement from the outside? I tried the handle. Locked. Of course. I reached into my pocket for my lockpick, set a tool of the trade I hadn't used since my early days auditing warehouses in the shipyard district. But then I stopped. I looked at the door frame. About 6 feet up, resting on the calm molding, was a small silver key. It was hidden in plain sight. Lazy. Arrogant. Justin assumed no one would ever look for it, because no one was ever supposed to be here when he was gone. I took the key down. My hand was trembling, not from age, but from adrenaline. I inserted the key into the deadbolt. It slid in effortlessly. I turned it. Thunk. The sound echoed through the empty house. I turned the knob and pulled the door open. A draft of cold air rushed up from the darkness below. It smelled of damp earth, mildew, and something sharp like ammonia. It was the smell of neglect. I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a steep wooden staircase. These were not the finished carpeted stairs of a luxury home. These were raw, unfinished planks. I took the first step. The wood groaned under my weight. I descended slowly. 1 step, 2 steps. The temperature dropped with every foot I went down. It was freezing down here. The expensive heating system that kept the upstairs like a tropical island clearly did not reach this deep. The walls were bare concrete. No drywall, no paint, just the raw foundation of the house. I reached the bottom of the stairs and swept my light across the space. I expected to see storage boxes. I expected to see old furniture covered in sheets, maybe holiday decorations. But the basement was mostly empty. Just a vast concrete cavern full of shadows, except for the far corner. My flashlight beam landed on a partition wall. It was a makeshift structure built from plywood and 2x4s looking like it had been thrown together in a weekend. It stood out like a sore thumb against the concrete. There was a heavy metal padlock on the plywood door. I walked toward it. The silence down here was deafening. My own breathing sounded ragged in my ears. I was a forensic auditor. I dealt in facts. I dealt in paper trails. I was not prepared for what I was feeling right now. A primal grandfatherly instinct was screaming at me to turn back, to run away, because whatever was behind that plywood wall was going to break me. But I could not turn back. The truth was the only thing that mattered. I approached the plywood room. I didn't need a key for this one. The hasp was not locked. The padlock was hanging open, hooked through the latch, but not clicked shut. Another sign of Justin's laziness. Another sign that he felt untouchable. I reached out and removed the lock. I put my hand on the rough wood of the door. I pushed. The door creaked open, revealing the darkness inside. I raised my flashlight, my heart hammering against my ribs like a sledgehammer. And then I saw it. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness like a scalpel. It did not land on a pile of storage boxes or holiday decorations. It landed on a mattress. It was a thin, yellowed piece of foam stripped bare of any sheets, thrown directly onto the damp concrete floor. There was no bed frame to lift it away from the biting cold that radiated up from the ground. A single blanket lay crumpled in the center. It was gray, coarse, and threadbare, the kind of blanket you might use to line a dog crate, not to cover a child. I stepped closer, my boots scraping against the grit on the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. The air down here was thick with a smell that made my stomach churn. It was the smell of unwashed clothes, mildew, and something sharp and acrid like ammonia. I moved the light to the left. A small wooden crate, likely scavenged from a trash pile, served as a nightstand. On top of it sat a plastic bowl. Not a plate, but a red plastic bowl stained with grease. Inside were the congealed orange remains of macaroni and cheese. It looked cold. It looked days old. There was no spoon, no fork. The implication hit me in the chest like a physical blow. Did she have to eat with her hands? While her father drank vintage Cabernet upstairs and ate steak off fine china, my granddaughter was down here eating cold leftovers like an animal. Next to the crate was a plastic bucket from a hardware store. I did not want to look inside. I prayed I did not have to look inside. But the forensic auditor in me took over. I had to know the extent of the crime. I shone the light into the bucket. My knees almost buckled. It was half full of urine. He did not even let her come upstairs to use the bathroom. He locked her down here in the dark, in the cold, with a bucket. I stood there shaking. Not from the temperature, which my phone told me was 42 degrees, but from a rage so pure and white-hot, it felt like it was burning the lining of my veins. I had sent this man $80,000 a year. I had set up a trust fund. I had paid for a renovation of the HVAC system 2 years ago to ensure the house was energy efficient. And yet, there were no vents down here. The heat I paid for was staying upstairs. The money I paid for her care was on his wrist, in his garage, in his wine cellar. I forced myself to keep looking. I needed evidence. I needed every single detail etched into my memory and my camera roll. I saw a row of nails hammered crudely into the plywood wall. Hanging from them were Mia's clothes. They were not the pretty dresses she wore when I visited. They were rags. Oversized t-shirts with holes in the hem. Sweatpants that were too short. This was her reality. The velvet dress she wore tonight was just a costume for the show he put on for me. Then my light caught something on the floor near the head of the mattress. I crouched down, my joints popping in the cold. It was a picture frame, a silver frame. I recognized it immediately. I had given it to Sarah on her wedding day. It was supposed to hold a photo of the happy couple, but the frame was lying face down on the dirty concrete. I reached out and picked it up. The glass was shattered, a spiderweb of cracks radiating from the center as if someone had stomped on it. I turned it over. Through the broken shards, I saw the photo. It was Sarah holding a baby Mia. They were laughing. It was the happiest moment of my daughter's life. But someone had taken a black permanent marker and defaced it. Sarah's eyes were scribbled out. Her mouth was crossed out with angry, violent slashes. The ink had soaked through the paper. This was not just neglect. This was not just greed. This was hatred. Justin did not just want my money. He hated Sarah. He hated the memory of her, and he was punishing Mia for having her mother's face. A sound escaped my throat. It was a low, guttural growl that I did not recognize as my own. I gripped the frame so hard a shard of glass sliced into my thumb. The pain felt good. It grounded me. I watched the drop of my own blood fall onto the dirty mattress. I stood up slowly. The trembling in my hands stopped. The tears that had been threatening to fall evaporated. In their place, a cold, mechanical switch flipped in my brain. The grandfather was gone. The grieving father was gone. In the darkness of that basement, standing over the evidence of my granddaughter's torture, Conrad Hallowell died. And the auditor was born. I took out my phone. I did not call the police. Not yet. The police would arrest him, yes. They would charge him with child endangerment. He would get a lawyer. He would get bail. He would play the victim. He would say he was overwhelmed with grief. The courts might go easy on him. No, that was not enough. I did not want him just arrested. I wanted him obliterated. I wanted to strip him of every dollar, every asset, every shred of dignity he possessed. I wanted him to feel the cold that Mia felt. I wanted him to eat from a bowl in a prison cell for the rest of his miserable life. I began to take photos. Click, the mattress. Click, the bucket. Click, the bowl. Click, the defaced photo. I recorded a video narrating the temperature, the smell, the lock on the door. I was building a case file. And when I was done, Justin Pierce would wish he had died in that car crash instead of my daughter. I put the silver frame into my coat pocket. I was taking Sarah out of this hellhole. I backed out of the room. I replaced the padlock. I left everything exactly as I found it. He could not know I had been here. Not yet. The trap had to be perfect. I walked back up the stairs, locked the basement door, and replaced the key on the doorframe. I walked out into the blizzard. The wind dried the sweat on my forehead instantly. I sat in my car and watched the house for a moment longer. It looked so beautiful from the outside. But now I knew. It was a tomb. And I was about to bring the sledgehammer. The rage I felt in that basement was a living thing, a fire that wanted to consume everything in its path. I wanted to wait in the dark. I wanted to wait for Justin to come home, to walk through that door, and I wanted to beat him with my bare hands until he understood the meaning of pain. But violence is messy. Violence is temporary. I did not want temporary satisfaction. I wanted permanent destruction. And for that, I needed to be cold. I needed to be the auditor. I ran back up the stairs, my breath clouding in the freezing air, and went out to my car. I popped the trunk. Underneath the spare tire, inside a battered toolbox that looked like junk, was my real toolkit. I grabbed a small black pouch. Inside were 4 high-definition motion-activated cameras. They were no bigger than a quarter with a battery life of 48 hours. I had used these to catch warehouse managers stealing inventory. Now I would use them to catch a monster stealing a childhood. I went back inside the house. I had to move fast. Justin had been gone for 30 minutes. Even in this storm, a quick trip to the city and back would take an hour tops. I was on borrowed time. I started in the living room. This was his stage. This was where he played the role of the grieving noble father. I needed to capture the performance. I climbed onto a sturdy oak chair and placed the first camera on top of the bookshelf, nestled between 2 leather-bound encyclopedias that I knew Justin had never opened. The lens had a perfect wide-angle view of the entire room, including the front door and the staircase. If he hit her, if he screamed at her, if he brought women home, I would see it. Then I went back to the basement. This was the hardest part. I walked back into that plywood cell. The smell hit me again, but I pushed through it. I needed an angle that would cover the mattress. I needed to see what happened when the lights went out. I looked around the room for a hiding spot, but it was too bare. There were no shelves, no furniture, just the crate and the bucket. Then I saw it. Lying in the corner, half buried under a pile of dirty laundry, was a teddy bear. My heart stopped. I recognized that bear. It was Barnaby. I had bought it for Mia on her 3rd birthday. It used to be fluffy and golden brown. Now it was matted gray with dust and missing an ear. It looked as broken as she was. I picked it up. The stuffing was lumpy, but it was still soft. I pulled a small pocket knife from my belt. With the precision of a surgeon, I made a tiny incision in the seam of the bear's remaining ear. I slid the camera inside, positioning the lens so it peered out through the plastic button of the eye. I stitched it back up with a few quick loops of thread from a travel sewing kit I kept in my jacket. I placed the bear on the crate facing the mattress. It looked like a discarded toy. But now it was a witness. "I am sorry, Mia," I whispered to the empty room. "I have to leave you here one more night. But I promise Barnaby is watching. And so am I." I placed the 3rd camera in the kitchen, hidden atop the refrigerator, overlooking the dining table. The kitchen is where families talk. It is where secrets are spilled over coffee and wine. I checked my watch. 45 minutes. He would be back soon. I retraced my steps. I went back to the basement door. I locked the padlock. I wiped my fingerprints off the metal. I locked the deadbolt. I placed the key back on the molding exactly where I found it, making sure the dust settled around it just so. I backed out of the hallway, smoothing the rug where my wet boots had tread. I moved to the foyer. I checked the door handle. I checked the lock. I had to make sure everything was exactly as he left it. The house had to look undisturbed. I slipped out the front door and locked it with my key. The wind was still howling, erasing my footprints in seconds. Nature was my accomplice tonight. I hurried back to my car tucked behind the utility shed. I climbed inside, my body shivering violently as the adrenaline began to fade. I pulled up the app on my phone. One by one, the feeds flickered to life. Camera 1, the silent, elegant living room. Camera 2, the pristine marble kitchen. Camera 3, the dark, grainy view of the basement mattress seen through the eye of a teddy bear. I sat there in the dark, watching the screens. I was not a grandfather anymore. I was a hunter in a blind, waiting for the prey to step into the crosshairs. And 10 minutes later, twin headlights cut through the storm. The Range Rover was back. The show was about to begin. I watched the screen of my phone as Justin moved through the house on the camera feed. He did not go to the basement. He did not check on his daughter. He went straight to the master bedroom, changed out of his casual sweater into a crisp navy blue suit, and splashed on cologne. He looked like a man preparing for a date, not a father mourning his late wife. 10 minutes later, the garage door opened again. The Range Rover backed out into the storm. I was already in gear. I kept my lights off until he turned the corner at the end of the block. Then I eased the Lincoln out from behind the utility shed. The chase was on. Tailing someone in a blizzard is a paradox. It is difficult because the visibility is near zero, the snow turning the world into a chaotic blur of white noise. But it is also easy because there is no one else on the road. It was just him and me, connected by a quarter-mile of swirling ice. I kept my distance, watching his taillights bleed into the white darkness like fresh wounds. He drove with confidence, aggressive and fast. He was heading east toward the city. I knew these roads. I knew every curve of the Massachusetts Turnpike. As we merged onto the highway, the tension in my shoulders began to harden into a cold, calculated focus. This was no longer a family matter. This was an investigation. I was back in the field, trailing a suspect who had embezzled something far more valuable than money. We drove for 40 minutes, the city skyline eventually rising out of the mist like a jagged set of teeth. Justin did not head toward the suburbs or the quiet family neighborhoods. He took the exit for the Seaport District. This was the new money of Boston. Glass towers that scraped the sky, restaurants that charged $50 for an appetizer, and rent prices that could feed a family for a year. It was a place for the young, the ambitious, and the wealthy. It was not a place for a grieving, single father struggling to make ends meet. He pulled up to the curb in front of the Meridian, a high-rise luxury apartment complex that screamed exclusivity. A valet braving the cold in a thick uniform rushed out to open his door. Justin handed him the keys without a second thought, slipping a bill into the man's hand with the casual grace of someone who did this every day. I parked my Lincoln down the street near a construction site and killed the engine. I grabbed my camera with the telephoto lens. I did not feel the cold anymore. My blood was running too hot. I moved on foot, sticking to the shadows of the scaffolding, keeping my eyes locked on the brightly lit lobby of the Meridian. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, designed to let the world see how beautiful the people inside were. Tonight, that transparency was his undoing. Justin stood in the center of the lobby, brushing snow off his coat. He checked his watch. He checked his reflection in the glass. He looked impatient. Then the elevator doors slid open. A woman walked out. She was stunning, I had to give him that. Tall, with blonde hair styled in loose waves that probably cost $300 to maintain. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat and high leather boots. She walked toward Justin with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. She did not shake his hand. She did not hug him like a friend. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. It was a kiss of possession. A kiss that said, "You are home." I snapped 3 photos in rapid succession. The shutter click was lost in the wind, but the image was burned onto the memory card. This was Tanya. This was the reason my granddaughter was sleeping on a mattress in a basement. But the knife in my heart had not been twisted fully yet. 2 small figures ran out of the elevator behind Tanya. "Daddy." I could not hear the word through the thick glass and the howling wind, but I could read the lips. I could see the joy. 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl. They were dressed in matching designer winter coats, looking like models from a catalog. They were healthy. They were happy. They ran to Justin and wrapped themselves around his legs. Justin laughed. He actually laughed. It was a sound I had not heard from him in years. He bent down and scooped them both up, one in each arm, spinning them around. The little girl kissed his cheek. The boy tugged at his tie. I lowered my camera. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the scene, my mind racing, doing the math that I prayed was wrong. They looked to be about 5 years old, maybe 5.5. Sarah died 6 years ago. The numbers clicked into place with the devastating precision of a forensic audit. Sarah had been fighting cancer for 2 years before she passed. She was in hospitals. She was in chemo. She was fighting for every breath, for every extra minute with Mia. And while she was dying, while she was withering away in a hospital bed, Justin had not been grieving. He had been building this. He had been building a backup life. These children were not just a mistake. They were a timeline. They were proof that his betrayal started long before he put my daughter in the ground. I raised the camera again. My hands were rock steady. I zoomed in on the twins. I needed clear shots of their faces. I needed to document their age, their clothes, the expensive toys they were clutching. The boy was holding a remote-controlled car. The girl was holding a doll that looked brand new. I thought about the bear in the basement. Barnaby, missing an ear, covered in dust. I thought about the bowl of cold macaroni. I watched Justin put the twins down and hand a credit card to the concierge at the front desk. I watched him guide Tanya and his secret family toward the hotel restaurant, connected to the lobby. They were going to have a feast. They were going to celebrate. And they were doing it on my dime. the $80,000 a year, the emergency loans for house repairs, the money for Mia's tutoring. It was all here. It was in the cashmere coat on Tanya's back. It was in the marble floors of this lobby. It was in the bellies of these two secret children. I was not just funding my granddaughter's abuse. I was fully financing the life of the people who replaced her. I took one last photo. It was a wide shot. Justin, Tanya, and the twins walking hand in hand under the golden chandelier of the lobby, a perfect, happy family. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. I lowered the camera and turned back toward the dark, freezing street. I had seen enough. I knew the who. I knew the where. Now I needed the how much. I needed to see the paper trail. I needed to see the blood money flowing through the veins of the banking system. I walked back to my car, the snow crunching under my boots. I was going to call my lawyer. I was going to call my contact at the bank. Tonight, Justin Pierce was eating lobster and drinking wine. He should enjoy it, because it was going to be his last supper. The audit was officially open, and I was going to make sure the balance due cost him everything. I sat in the front seat of my Lincoln, the engine idling softly against the storm. The heater was running now, blasting warm air against my frozen hands, but I could not feel it. A different kind of cold had settled into my marrow, a cold that no heater could touch. I held my camera in my lap, the LCD screen glowing in the darkness of the car. On the screen was the freeze frame of a happy family: Justin, Tanya, and the twins. I stared at that image until my eyes burned. I was not looking at it as a grandfather anymore. I was looking at it as a forensic auditor. In my line of work, we have a saying: the numbers never lie. People lie. Ledgers lie. But the raw data, if you know how to read it, always tells the truth. And the data in front of me was screaming a truth so horrific, I had to close my eyes for a moment to keep from retching. I zoomed in on the twins, a boy and a girl. They were tall for their age, but their features were soft, their baby fat still clinging to their cheeks. I looked at their teeth. The boy was missing a front tooth. The girl had that specific coordination of a child who has just started kindergarten. I did the math. I calculated the variables: height, development, behavior. They were 5 years old, maybe pushing 6. Let us be generous and say 5.5. I pulled out my notebook. The leather was cold against my skin. I clicked my pen and wrote down the date. Today's date. Then I subtracted 5 years and 9 months, the gestation period, the time of conception. The date I arrived at was June. 6 years ago. My hand stopped moving. The ink bled into the paper, forming a small black pool. June. 6 years ago. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was not in a car in Boston. I was back in the sterile white room of Massachusetts General Hospital. It was summer. The air conditioning was humming, trying to battle the heat wave outside. Sarah was lying in the bed. She weighed 90 pounds. Her hair, that beautiful chestnut hair that Mia had inherited, was gone. Her skin was translucent like parchment paper. That June, Sarah had been in the middle of her 3rd round of chemotherapy. It was the brutal kind, the kind that scorches the earth in hopes of killing the weed. She was vomiting every hour. She was in agony, and every time she opened her eyes, she looked for him. "Where is Justin?" she would whisper, her voice cracking like dry leaves. "He is working, honey," I would tell her, holding her hand, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "He is working extra shifts to pay for the treatments. He loves you. He will be here soon." And he would come in late. He would smell of soap. He would look tired, but not the kind of tired you get from working a double shift at a warehouse. It was a different kind of exhaustion. He would sit by her bed for 20 minutes, check his watch, and say he had to go back, to take care of Mia. I believed him. I admired him. I wrote him checks for $5,000, $10,000 at a time. For the experimental drugs, he said. For the night nurse, he said. But looking at the date in my notebook, the lie unraveled. He was not working. He was not taking care of Mia. That June, while my daughter was vomiting into a plastic basin, while her body was literally eating itself alive, Justin was not at the warehouse. He was in bed with Tanya. He was creating a new life while watching his wife's life drain away. Those twins, those happy, healthy children laughing in the hotel lobby, they were conceived while Sarah was dying. The realization hit me with the force of a physical assault. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel. Once. Twice. The horn blared out into the snowy night, a long, angry sound that was swallowed by the wind. It was not just adultery. Adultery is a weakness. This was predation. This was a calculated long-term investment in replacing a dying asset. He knew Sarah was terminal. He knew the timeline. He did not wait for her to die to move on. He started building his lifeboat while the ship was still sinking. And the money. My mind raced back through 6 years of bank transfers. I had access to the trust account, but I had never looked closely at Justin's personal spending. I respected his privacy. I was a fool. I remembered the medical complications he claimed Sarah had in her final months. He asked for an extra $20,000 for a specialist in New York. We never went to New York. He said the doctor came to us. I paid it. That $20,000. That was the down payment on the condo where Tanya lives. I remembered the funeral. Oh God, the funeral. Justin stood by the grave, tears streaming down his face, looking like the most broken man in the world. He held Mia's hand. He accepted the condolences of hundreds of people. And Tanya was there. I remembered her now. She was in the back row wearing sunglasses. I thought she was a distant cousin or a colleague. She was pregnant at the funeral. She was standing there watching my daughter be lowered into the ground, carrying the child of the grieving husband. I felt a bile rise in my throat. I opened the car door and leaned out, retching into the snow. Nothing came out but dry heaves and the bitter taste of betrayal. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and sat back up. The air inside the car felt different now. It was no longer just cold. It was clear. The fog of grief that had clouded my judgment for 6 years had finally lifted. I looked at the photo of the twins again. I did not hate them. They were innocent. They were victims of his biology, just as much as Mia was a victim of his neglect. But they were living proof of the fraud. They were the biological receipts of his crime. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact for my lawyer, Harrison Stone. Harrison was a shark. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you did not want a settlement. You wanted a scorched earth policy. I had not called him in years because I had no wars to fight. Tonight, I was declaring war. I dialed the number. It was late past 10 o'clock, but men like Harrison never sleep. Hallowell, his voice rasped over the line, sounding surprised. I haven't heard from you since the retirement party. Everything all right? No, Harrison, I said, my voice sounding incredibly calm even to my own ears. It was the calm of a man who has just decided to pull the trigger. Nothing is all right. I need you to open a file. A file for what? For a forensic audit of the Justin Pierce household. And I need you to prepare a custody petition. Emergency ex parte. Conrad, slow down. Harrison said, the shift in his tone immediate. Custody is Mia in danger. She is living in a basement, Harrison. I said the words cutting through the air like glass shards. She is sleeping on a mattress on the concrete floor while he lives upstairs. And I just found out he has a second family. 2 kids, 5 years old. There was silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, stunned silence. 5 years old, Harrison asked finally. But Sarah? Exactly, I cut him off. He was breeding them while she was dying. And I paid for it. I paid for all of it. I heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor, then the rustling of paper. Harrison was moving. Where are you, Conrad? I am outside the hotel where he is celebrating their birthday. Do not go inside, Harrison warned. Do not do anything violent. If you touch him, we lose the high ground. We need to be surgical about this. I am not going to touch him, I said, watching the hotel entrance where Justin was still likely laughing over appetizers. I am going to eviscerate him. I want you to pull the deed to the Wellesley house. I want you to check the terms of the trust. I drafted that trust, Conrad Harrison said, his voice sharpening. There is a morality clause. If he cohabitates, if he endangers the welfare of the child, he loses the right to reside. I finished the sentence for him. He loses everything, Harrison corrected. The stipend, the access to the accounts. And if we can prove the abuse, Conrad, we can put him in prison. That is the goal, I said. But not yet. Tomorrow is the party. He invited me. He wants to show off his success to his investors. He wants me to play the role of the benevolent grandfather one last time. So we let him have his party, Harrison said, understanding the plan immediately. We let him have the party, I agreed. I want you to meet me there. Bring the papers. Bring the sheriff. But wait outside until I give the signal. What is the signal? I looked at the photo of the twins one last time. When I give him his present, I said. I hung up the phone. I started the car and put it into drive. I was not going back to the hotel to sleep. I had work to do. I had to go through 6 years of bank statements. I had to match every withdrawal to every lie. I had to build a timeline that was so watertight that when I dropped it on his head, it would crush him. I drove away from the city, leaving the happy family in the warm glow of the hotel. Enjoy your dinner, Justin. Order the expensive wine. Hug your secret children. Because tomorrow the bill comes due, and the auditor is coming to collect. I drove back to Wellesley in a trance. The snow was falling harder now, turning the world into a blur of white, but my mind was crystal clear. I parked the Lincoln in the same spot as before, tucked behind the utility shed, invisible to the naked eye, but perfectly positioned for surveillance. I sat in the darkness, the engine off the cold, seeping through the floorboards, and I held my phone like it was a weapon. The app was open. The feeds were live. I was ready. 20 minutes later, the headlights swept across the front lawn. The Range Rover pulled into the driveway. But this time, Justin did not park in the garage. He left the car running near the front steps like a valet stand. He jumped out and opened the passenger door for Tanya. She stepped out, wrapping her coat tight against the wind, and looked up at the house. I watched on the screen as the front door opened. Camera 1, hidden in the bookshelf, captured the invasion in high definition. They walked in like they owned the place. Tanya did not wipe her boots. She stomped the snow and slush directly onto the Persian rug in the foyer. The same rug Sarah had bought in Istanbul on her honeymoon. It was a small act of disrespect, but it told me everything I needed to know. She did not care about this home. She only cared that it was warm and expensive. The twins burst in behind her, screaming with excitement. They ran circles around the living room, their wet boots leaving dark streaks on the hardwood floor. The boy, the one with the missing tooth, grabbed a crystal vase from the side table, a vase I had given Sarah for her 30th birthday, and held it up like a trophy. "Be careful with that, buddy," Justin said, but his voice was weak. There was no discipline in it. He was smiling. He was just happy they were happy. Tanya pulled off her cashmere coat and threw it. She did not hang it up. She threw it directly onto Sarah's favorite reading chair, the wingback by the fireplace where my daughter used to sit and nurse Mia when she was a baby. It was a territorial mark. She was covering Sarah's memory with her own presence. "God, it smells like old people in here," Tanya complained, her voice sharp and grating through the camera's microphone. Justin, you really need to get rid of this furniture. It is depressing. It feels like a mausoleum. I am working on it, babe, Justin replied, walking over to wrap his arms around her waist. He kissed her neck. Right there in the living room, right in front of the photos of his dead wife that he hadn't bothered to take down yet. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers went numb. I am working on the old man too. Once the checks clear next month, we can start remodeling. We will gut the whole place, make it modern, just for you. Gut the place. He was talking about erasing my daughter completely. Then the mood shifted. Tanya pulled away from him and looked around with a scowl. Where is the help? She asked. Justin sighed. Mia, get up here. His voice was not the gentle fatherly tone he used with me. It was a bark, a command. A moment later, the hallway door opened. Mia appeared. She had changed out of her velvet party dress. She was wearing oversized gray sweatpants and a stained t-shirt that looked like it belonged to Justin. She looked small, defeated, and terrified. Mommy and the kids are hungry, Justin said, gesturing to Tanya and the twins. Go to the kitchen and heat up the leftovers from dinner. And get juice boxes for the twins. Now. Mia did not argue. She did not look at him. She just nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor, and shuffled toward the kitchen. I switched the feed to camera 2. The kitchen camera gave me a bird's-eye view of the cruelty. Mia walked to the fridge. She was 10 years old, but she moved like an old woman. She took out a platter of expensive takeout sushi and steak that Justin must have bought earlier. She began to arrange it on plates. Tanya walked into the kitchen, the heels of her boots clicking on the marble. She leaned against the counter, watching Mia with a look of pure disdain. She did not offer to help. She did not say thank you. She treated my granddaughter like a defective appliance that she was forced to tolerate. Hurry up, Tanya snapped. They are starving, and do not drop anything this time. God, you are so clumsy. I do not know how your father deals with you. Mia's hand trembled as she poured apple juice into 2 plastic cups. She was trying so hard to be invisible, to shrink into the air itself. She carried the juice out to the living room. I switched back to camera 1. The twins were jumping on the sofa now, jumping on the Italian leather with their shoes on. Justin was watching them, laughing, egging them on. Look at them go, he chuckled. Mia approached the girl twin holding out the cup. Here, she whispered. The girl twin stopped jumping. She looked down at Mia from the height of the sofa. She looked at the juice. Then, with a cruelty that can only be learned from a parent, she swatted the cup out of Mia's hand. I do not want apple, the little girl screamed. I want grape. The cup hit the floor. Sticky yellow juice splashed over the rug and onto Mia's socks. Justin did not scold the twin. He did not tell her to apologize. He turned on Mia. Damn it, Mia, he shouted, his face contorting into ugly rage. Can't you do anything right? Look at this mess. You are ruining the rug. I did not. Mia started to whimper, backing away. She knocked it. Do not lie to me, Justin roared. He took a step toward her, raising his hand. I flinched in my car. I almost dropped the phone. He did not hit her. Not this time. He lowered his hand, but the threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Clean it up, Tanya said coldly, stepping over the puddle as if Mia were a piece of trash. And then get out of my sight. Go downstairs. We are trying to have a family night, and you are bringing everyone down. Mia dropped to her knees. She used the sleeve of her t-shirt to wipe up the juice. She was crying silently, her small shoulders shaking. The twins watched her smirking. They had won. They were the alphas in this pack, and she was the runt. When she finished, she stood up, holding the wet, sticky shirt away from her skin. Go. Justin pointed to the hallway. Mia ran. She disappeared through the door that led to the basement. I heard the lock click. Justin turned back to Tanya and the twins, his face instantly relaxing into a smile. Sorry about that, babe. She is just difficult. You know how it is. Tanya sighed, picking up a piece of sushi. You really need to send her to boarding school, Justin. Or somewhere. She just does not fit in with us. I know, Justin said, popping a piece of steak into his mouth. I am working on it. As soon as the old man signs over the education trust, she is gone. I sat in the dark car staring at the screen. The image of my granddaughter on her knees wiping up juice while her replacements laughed at her was burned into my retinas. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is impulsive. What I felt was the cold absolute zero of a verdict being reached. They were not a family. They were parasites. They had invaded a host, consumed its resources, and were now trying to expel the last remaining antibody. But they forgot one thing. The host had a defense mechanism. A defense mechanism that was sitting in a Lincoln town car holding a phone full of evidence. I closed the app. I had seen the invasion. I had seen the intent. He wanted to gut the house. He wanted to send Mia away. He wanted the trust fund. He was going to get none of it. I started the engine. I checked the time. It was almost midnight. I had 8 hours until the party. 8 hours to prepare the final audit. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the muddy track. The invasion was successful, Justin. Enjoy your victory tonight. Sleep in my daughter's bed. Let your mistress wear her clothes. Because tomorrow the landlord is coming home, and he is bringing an eviction notice written in fire. The screen on my phone was small, just a few inches of glass and pixels, but the image it broadcast was sharp enough to slice through my heart. I sat in the freezing darkness of my car, the engine block cracking, as it cooled, and watched the dinner party unfold in the house I had paid for. I had switched the feed to camera 3, the one hidden atop the refrigerator. From this angle, the dining room was a stage and the players were taking their places. Justin sat at the head of the table, the king of his castle. Tanya sat to his right, radiating a smug sense of ownership. The twins were seated on either side, banging their silverware against the table, demanding food. And then there was Mia. My granddaughter was not sitting. There was no chair set for her. She was standing by the sideboard holding a heavy silver pitcher of water. She looked like a servant in a Victorian manor, not a child in her own home. She was wearing that oversized stained t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, while everyone else at the table was dressed in designer clothes. I watched as Justin opened a bottle of wine. It was a Chateau Margaux. I recognized the label. I had bought that bottle for Sarah's 30th birthday. We were saving it for a special occasion. Justin was pouring it now for his mistress, like it was table wine. Here is to us, Justin said, raising his glass. To the future. To the future, Tanya echoed, clinking her glass against his. And to getting rid of the past. They drank. My daughter's wine, my daughter's house, my money. Then came the main course. I zoomed in on the platter in the center of the table. Lobster. 4 massive bright red lobsters steamed and glistening with butter. Alongside them were thick cuts of filet mignon. This was a meal that cost hundreds of dollars. I did the mental math instantly. I had transferred $5,000 into the household account 3 days ago. Justin had told me it was for a structural repair on the roof. He said there was a leak in Mia's bedroom. There was no leak. There was only lobster. I watched the twins tear into the food. They ate with the chaotic greed of spoiled children, butter dripping down their chins. Justin laughed, wiping the boy's face with a linen napkin. Mia Tanya snapped, not even looking up from her plate. More water. Mia stepped forward instantly, the pitcher heavy in her small hands. She poured water into Tanya's glass. Her hand shook slightly. Careful, Tanya hissed. God, you are useless. Do not spill it on the table. This is real mahogany, not that cheap particle board you are used to. I gripped the steering wheel. That table was not mahogany. It was oak. and Sarah had picked it out at an estate sale. She had sanded it down and refinished it herself. She loved that table. Mia finished pouring and stepped back into the shadows. She watched the meat. I could see her eyes fixated on the lobster. She was hungry. I remembered the bowl of cold macaroni in the basement. Daddy, the girl twin, said, her mouth full. "Can I have the claw?" "Sure, Princess," Justin said. He cracked the claw open, pulling out the sweet white meat. He dipped it in butter and fed it to her. Mia took a half step forward. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible through the microphone, but I heard it. I heard the desperation. "Can I have a piece?" The room went silent. The twins stopped chewing. Tanya slowly lowered her fork. She turned in her chair to look at Mia. The look on her face was not anger. It was amusement. Cruel, twisted amusement. "Excuse me," Tanya said softly. "What did you say?" I am hungry," Mia stammered. Tanya laughed. It was a dry, high-pitched sound. "Justin, did you hear that? She wants lobster." Justin did not look at his daughter. He looked at his plate. "She has food downstairs, Tanya." "She does not like the macaroni," Tanya said, mocking Mia's voice. "Well, isn't that too bad? You know, Mia, lobster is for people who contribute to this family, people who bring joy. You just bring gloom. You are like a little dark cloud that follows us around." "I am not," Mia whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "You are," Tanya continued, picking up her wineglass. "You are exactly like your mother." My blood froze. Mia stiffened. "Do not talk about my mommy." "Oh, I will talk about her," Tanya said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Because I have to live in her house. I have to look at her ugly wallpaper. I have to sit on her uncomfortable furniture. Your mother had terrible taste, Mia. Just look at you. You are weak, pale, always crying. Sarah was just like that, wasn't she? Weak. That is why she died. She did not have the fight in her." "That is not true," Mia cried out. Her little hands balled into fists. "Mommy was strong. She gave up." Tanya spat back. "She left you. She left Justin. And now I have to clean up her mess. I have to raise her broken little girl. You should be grateful I even let you stay inside. If it were up to me, you would be in an orphanage." Mia looked at her father. She looked at him with a pleading intensity that would have broken a stone. "Daddy, tell her. Tell her Mommy was strong." I held my breath. I waited for Justin to speak up. I waited for him to defend the woman who had loved him, the woman who had borne his child, the woman whose death had paid for the food in his mouth. Justin wiped his mouth with his napkin. He took a sip of wine. He looked at Mia. "Tanya is right, Mia," he said coldly. The air left my lungs. "Your mother was sick," Justin said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She was sick for a long time. And it was exhausting. For all of us. Tanya is here now. Tanya is the one taking care of us. You need to show her respect." "But she said Mommy was weak." Mia sobbed. "Stop crying." Justin slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "I am sick of the crying. It has been 6 years, Mia. Get over it. Your mother is dead. She is in the ground. This is our life now. If you cannot accept that, then you can go back to the basement and stay there until you learn some gratitude." Mia stood there for a second, her body trembling violently. Then she dropped the silver pitcher. It hit the floor with a deafening clang. Water splashed everywhere, soaking the rug, soaking Tanya's boots. "You little brat!" Tanya shrieked, jumping up. "Get out!" Justin roared, pointing at the door. "Get out of my sight before I really give you something to cry about." Mia turned and ran. I watched her flee down the hallway. I watched her disappear through the door to the basement. I heard the lock click from the outside. Justin had remote locks installed. He locked her in from his phone. Back in the dining room, Tanya was wiping water off her boots, muttering curses. "I cannot wait until she is gone," Tanya said. "Soon, babe," Justin said, pouring her more wine. His anger had vanished instantly, replaced by that smooth, sociopathic calm. "Once the old man signs the papers tomorrow, we ship her off to that boarding school in Vermont. The one for troubled youth. They will straighten her out, and we will never have to see her again." He picked up a piece of lobster and ate it. I stared at the screen. I was not shaking anymore. I was perfectly still. I had seen the physical abuse. That was a crime. But this psychological dismantling of a child, this desecration of my daughter's memory, this was something far worse. This was a soul murder. Justin had just signed his own death warrant, not a physical one. I would not kill him. That would be too easy. I was going to let him live, but I was going to strip him of every layer of protection he had. I was going to take the house, the cars, the money, the reputation, the freedom. I was going to leave him naked in the snow, just like he had left my granddaughter's soul. I closed the app. I did not need to see anymore. The audit was complete. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was guilty on all counts. I picked up my phone and dialed Harrison Stone again. "Do not sleep, Harrison," I said when he answered. "I am awake, Conrad," he replied. "I am looking at the trust documents now." "Add a clause," I said. My voice sounded like grinding metal. "What clause?" "Total liquidation," I said. "I want a writ of seizure prepared for tomorrow morning. And Harrison, call the district attorney, the DAY. Because I have a witness," I said, looking at the dark outline of the house. "A witness who is 5 years old and missing a front tooth. But the real witness is recorded on my server. I have him, Harrison. I have him on tape admitting to fraud, admitting to conspiracy, and I have him abusing a minor." Conrad, Harrison said, his voice serious. "If we do this, there is no going back. You are destroying the father of your grandchild." "He is not a father," I said, starting the car. "He is a tick, and I am the fire. Meet me at the party, Harrison. Noon sharp, and wear your best suit. We are going to a funeral." "Whose funeral?" Harrison asked. "His," I said. I put the car in gear and drove away into the storm. The snow was stopping. The clouds were breaking. Tomorrow would be a clear, cold day. A perfect day for judgment. I drove straight to the financial district. The city was asleep, buried under 6 inches of fresh snow, but the lights in the corner office of Stone and Associates were burning bright. Harrison Stone was waiting for me. We had known each other for 30 years. We had fought in the trenches of corporate litigation together, dismantling corrupt CEOs and uncovering embezzlement schemes that made the front pages of the Times. But tonight, the case file wasn't a corporation. It was my life. I walked into his office carrying a black weatherproof case. Harrison was standing by the window looking out at the frozen harbor. He turned when I entered. He didn't offer me a drink. He didn't ask how I was. He looked at the expression on my face and he simply pointed to the mahogany conference table. "Show me," he said. I opened the case. I didn't say a word. I laid out the photos first. The basement mattress, the bucket, the bowl of congealed macaroni, the defaced photo of Sarah. Then I laid out the photos from the hotel lobby. Justin, Tanya, the twins, the happy secret family funded by my grief. Harrison picked up the photo of the basement. His hand, usually steady as a surgeon's, trembled slightly. He adjusted his glasses, leaning in closer, as if he couldn't believe what his eyes were registering. "Jesus Christ, Conrad," he whispered, the air hissing through his teeth. This This is medieval. He is keeping her in a dungeon. That is the emotional evidence, I said, my voice flat and clinical. I pushed it aside. Emotional evidence wins over a jury, Harrison. But I don't want a jury trial. I want a summary execution, financially speaking. I pulled out the second stack of papers. These were the bank statements I had downloaded and printed in the car. I had highlighted the transactions in yellow. Look at the dates, Harrison. Look at the outflows. Harrison sat down, putting on his reading glasses. He picked up the ledger. $80,000 a year in direct stipend, I began pointing to the columns, plus $20,000 for medical emergencies, plus $15,000 for home repairs. Look at this transfer here. June 12th, $5,000 for Mia's summer camp. I remember that Harrison nodded. You were so happy she was going to horse riding camp. There was no camp, I said. I checked the camp's records tonight. Mia was never registered. Now look at this credit card statement from a jewelry store in Back Bay. The date matches. June 14th. A diamond tennis bracelet. $5,000. Harrison looked up, his eyes wide. He bought his mistress jewelry with his daughter's camp money. It gets worse, I said. I pulled out the deed to the Wellesley house. This was the weapon I needed him to sharpen. The house is held in the Hallowell Family Trust, I said. Justin is the trustee. Mia is the beneficiary. But read Section 4, Paragraph C, the occupancy clause. Harrison flipped through the thick legal document. The paper rustled loudly in the silent office. He found the paragraph. He read it silently, his lips moving slightly. The trustee shall have the right to reside in the property solely for the purpose of providing a stable environment for the beneficiary, he read aloud. This right is contingent upon the trustee maintaining the property in good condition and... He stopped. And I prompted. And adhering to a standard of moral conduct that reflects the values of the grantor, Harrison finished. He looked up at me. Conrad, this is boilerplate language. It's the morality clause. Usually it's impossible to enforce. Moral conduct is subjective. Any judge would throw this out as vague. Not if the violation is criminal, I said. Not if the violation involves child endangerment. And not if the violation involves fraud. I pulled out a USB drive and slid it across the table. I have him on video, Harrison. I have him admitting that he wants to gut the house. I have him admitting that he plans to send Mia away to a facility for troubled youth so he can take over the property. That is not just immoral. That is a breach of fiduciary duty. He is acting against the interests of the beneficiary. Harrison picked up the USB drive. He turned it over in his fingers. If we can prove he is acting against Mia's interests, he said, his lawyer brain firing on all cylinders. Now then, the trust is voidable. We can remove him as trustee immediately. And the occupancy right, I asked. It vanishes, Harrison said. If he is no longer the trustee, he is just a guest who has overstayed his welcome. And the money, I asked. The $480,000 I sent him. Harrison frowned. That is trickier. You sent that voluntarily. It could be argued it was a gift. No, I said. I pulled out the final piece of paper. It was a single sheet, a copy of the very first check I sent him 6 years ago. In the memo line, written in my cramped, precise handwriting, were the words "loan against trust assets." I wrote that on every single check, Harrison. Every transfer. I never marked it as a gift. I marked it as a loan to the trust, to be managed by the trustee. Harrison's jaw dropped. You treated the stipend as a loan. I am an auditor, Harrison, I said, leaning back in my chair. I never give money away without a paper trail. I thought I was lending it to the trust to maintain the lifestyle of my granddaughter. But if he used that money for personal gain, if he used it to buy lobsters and diamonds and support a second family, then it is embezzlement, Harrison whispered. He wasn't spending a gift. He was stealing loan capital from the trust. Exactly. Harrison stood up. He walked over to his bookshelf and pulled down a heavy legal volume. He flipped it open, scanning the pages rapidly. "Conrad," he said, turning back to me, "if we frame it this way, if we hit him with the breach of fiduciary duty, the child endangerment, and the embezzlement of trust funds, we don't just evict him, we bankrupt him. We can attach a lien to every asset he owns, his car, his personal accounts, even his future wages." "Do it," I said. Harrison looked at the clock. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. "The courthouse opens at 9, he said. "I can get an emergency judge in chambers by 9:30. We can have the papers signed and stamped by 10. "The party starts at noon, I said. Harrison smiled. It was a shark's smile. Cold, predatory. "I will draft the writ of seizure," he said, "and the order of protection for Mia. We will need the sheriff to serve them." "I will handle the sheriff," I said. "You just get the ink on the paper. I want the document to be heavy, Harrison. I want him to feel the weight of it when I put it in his hand." Harrison sat down at his computer. His fingers began to fly across the keyboard. The sound was rhythmic, like a drumbeat. "One more thing," I said. Harrison paused. "The twins," I said. "And Tanya. What about them? They are living in the house." "Technically," Harrison said, typing again, "under the terms of the trust, unauthorized occupants are considered trespassers. If Justin is removed as trustee, they have no legal standing to be there. Add them to the eviction order," I said. "By name. Tanya and her children. I want them escorted off the premises." "That is harsh, Conrad. The kids are 5. They are the beneficiaries of the stolen funds," I said, my voice hardening. "They are eating the food that belongs to Mia. They are sleeping in the warmth while she freezes. I am not sending them to jail, Harrison. I am just sending them back to reality." Harrison nodded. He understood. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about balance. It was about correcting a ledger that had been in the red for 6 years. I watched him type. Section by section, paragraph by paragraph, he was constructing the cage. I poured myself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. My hand was steady. My heart rate was slow. For 6 years, I had been the victim. I had been the sad, lonely old man writing checks to buy a connection to his dead daughter. But as I watched the pages of the lawsuit pile up in the output tray of the printer, I realized I had changed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the executioner. And at noon today, the guillotine was going to drop. The storm broke at dawn, leaving the sky a piercing, innocent blue. It was the kind of deception nature pulls right before a catastrophe. I spent the morning in my hotel room, shaving with a steady hand, dressing in my best charcoal suit, the one I used to wear for federal indictments. I tied my tie in a Windsor knot, tight and precise. I looked in the mirror. The tired grandfather was gone. The man looking back at me was cold iron. I arrived at the house at 11:45. I parked my Lincoln down the street just far enough to be unnoticed by the valet team Justin had hired. Yes, valets, for a 5-year-old's birthday party. I watched as a fleet of black SUVs and European sports cars began to line the driveway. The snow I had trudged through the night before had been shoveled away by a landscaping crew, paid double for the emergency service. I walked toward the house, my coat buttoned against the wind, the legal file heavy in my briefcase. From the outside, the property looked like a carnival of wealth. A massive arch of balloons in gold and silver framed the front door. Not colorful, childish balloons, but metallic, sophisticated ones that screamed money. I could hear music drifting out, a live string quartet playing pop songs. I stepped onto the porch. The door was open, manned by a server with a tray of champagne flutes. I declined the drink and stepped inside. The transformation was absolute. The house didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a showroom. The furniture had been rearranged to create a dance floor. The dining room where Mia had been humiliated the night before was now laden with a buffet that would have fed a small army. I saw towers of shrimp cocktail. I saw trays of caviar. I saw a chocolate fountain. I did a quick mental calculation. The catering alone was easily $15,000. And there, in the center of it all, was Justin. He was wearing a light gray suit tailored to perfection, holding a glass of scotch. He looked radiant. He was holding court with a group of men I recognized vaguely from the financial pages, venture capitalists, real estate developers. People he was trying to hustle. People he was trying to impress with the illusion of stability and generational wealth. I stood by a pillar near the entrance, unnoticed in the crowd. I watched him work the room. He laughed. He clapped men on the back. He gestured grandly to the house as if he had built it with his own hands. "Welcome, everyone," I heard him boom, his voice smooth as silk. "Thank you for coming out after the storm. We are so blessed to have you here to celebrate the twins. They are our little miracles." Miracles. He called the evidence of his adultery miracles. Tanya was by his side playing the role of the gracious hostess. She was wearing a white dress that looked dangerously like a wedding gown. She held the twin girl on her hip, parading her around like a prop. The little girl was wearing a diamond necklace. Real diamonds. My diamonds. Or rather, bought with the money that should have secured Mia's college education. I scanned the room for Mia. I looked in the corners. I looked near the kitchen. I didn't see her. Of course not. She wasn't part of the brand. She was the defect. She was likely locked in her room, or worse, back in the basement, warned to stay silent while the beautiful people celebrated. I moved deeper into the room, gripping the handle of my briefcase. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I listened to the snippets of conversation around me. "Great house," Justin, one man said. "The market in Wellesley is on fire. You sitting on a gold mine here. We are thinking of selling, actually." Justin replied, his voice low and confidential. "Looking for something more modern. Maybe out in Weston. The memories here. You know. It is time to move on." He was selling it. He was already spending the equity in his mind. He was selling my daughter's sanctuary to fund his new life with his mistress. A waiter passed by with a tray of truffle arancini. I recognized the catering company logo on his apron. Elite Events. I knew them. They were the most expensive in Boston. I had audited them once. They required a 50% deposit up front. Justin had paid that deposit 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, he had told me he couldn't afford a math tutor for Mia. He had begged for a check, tears in his eyes, saying he felt like a failure of a father because he couldn't help her with her fractions. I had written the check immediately. I looked at the truffle arancini. That was the math tutor. The rage I felt the night before had crystallized into something sharper. It wasn't heat anymore. It was clarity. I saw the entire ecosystem of his lies. Every smile, every handshake, every sip of expensive wine was fueled by theft. He wasn't just stealing money. He was stealing the sympathy of these people. He was playing the widower who had found love again, the resilient hero. I checked my watch. Noon. Harrison Stone would be pulling up right about now. The sheriff would be with him. I saw Justin tap a spoon against his champagne glass. The room quieted down. The string quartet stopped playing. "Friends, family," Justin announced, beaming. "If I could have your attention, we are about to cut the cake. But first, I just want to say a few words about gratitude." I stepped out from behind the pillar. I walked into the center of the room. The crowd parted instinctively for the older man with the grim face and the heavy briefcase. Justin saw me. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, before he forced it back into place. "And look who is here," Justin announced, opening his arms wide. "The man who makes it all possible. Everyone, please welcome Conrad, the children's grandfather. Applause rippled through the room. Polite, wealthy applause. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I kept walking until I was standing right in front of him. The space between us was charged with electricity. He smelled of expensive cologne and scotch. I smelled of cold air and judgment. "You made it," Justin said, his voice dropping slightly, a hint of nervousness creeping in. "I wasn't sure you would come after last night." "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Justin," I said. My voice was amplified by the silence of the room. Everyone was watching. "I brought a gift," I said. "Oh, Conrad." "You didn't have to." Tanya chimed in, stepping forward, eyes glistening with greed. She probably expected keys to a new car, or maybe a vacation home. I looked at her. I looked at the twins. Then I looked back at Justin. "It is not for the twins," I said loudly, so the back of the room could hear. "It is for you, Justin." I set the briefcase on the table right next to the 3-tier birthday cake. The click of the latches opening sounded like gunshots. I reached inside. I didn't pull out a check. I pulled out a thick stack of documents bound in blue legal covers. On top sat the oversized, terrifying seal of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. "What is this?" Justin asked, his smile finally dying. I handed him the stack. It was heavy. He had to use 2 hands to hold it. "It is an audit, Justin," I said, "and you came up short." The moment I stepped across the threshold, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was a physical change, like the drop in pressure before a tornado touches down. The string quartet was playing a lively rendition of Vivaldi, but to my ears, it sounded like a funeral dirge. I stood in the entryway, shaking the melting snow from my coat onto the marble floor. I did not wait for the server to take my coat. I did not wait to be announced. I simply stood there, a dark gray statue, in a room full of peacocks. The guests nearest to the door went quiet first. They turned to look at the new arrival, expecting perhaps another wealthy investor or a local politician. Instead, they saw me. They saw a 68-year-old man with a face carved from granite, holding a battered leather briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. The silence spread outward from the door like a ripple in a pond. Conversations died mid-sentence. The clinking of silverware against fine china stopped. Even the musicians seemed to sense the shift, their tempo faltering slightly, before they trailed off into an awkward silence. In the center of the room, Justin froze. He had his arm around a man in a navy blazer, likely a potential investor for one of his phantom business ventures. Justin's back was to me, but he felt the room go cold. He turned around slowly. His face was flushed with alcohol and triumph, but when his eyes locked onto mine, the color drained away instantly. For a second, just a fleeting heartbeat, I saw the terror. I saw the look of a man who knows the executioner has arrived. But Justin was a professional. He was a con artist of the highest caliber. He blinked once and the terror vanished, replaced by a wide, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He handed his drink to a passing waiter and spread his arms wide, walking toward me with the enthusiastic stride of a loving son-in-law. "Conrad," he boomed, his voice filling the silent room. "You made it. I was so worried about the roads. Everyone, look who is here. It is the grandfather of the hour." He reached me and pulled me into a hug. His grip was tight, too tight. It was a warning, not an embrace. He smelled of expensive scotch and fear. Close to my ear, where no one else could hear, he whispered through his teeth, "What are you doing here, Conrad? You look like the Grim Reaper. You are scaring the guests." I pulled back from the hug, slowly peeling his hands off my shoulders as if they were covered in filth. I looked him dead in the eye. "I am here for the party, Justin. I wouldn't miss a celebration of family." Justin let out a nervous laugh, turning to the crowd. He is quite the joker, my father-in-law. Always has that dry sense of humor. "Come on in, Conrad. Let me get you a drink. We have a 19-year-old single malt I think you will appreciate. He tried to steer me toward the bar, tried to move me to the periphery of the room where I could be contained, where I wouldn't be a spectacle. But I planted my feet. I was not moving. I was the anchor, and he was the sinking ship. I do not want a drink, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I want to see the family. Tanya appeared at his elbow then. She was breathless, her face flushed. She looked at me and then immediately at the heavy briefcase in my hand. Her eyes lit up. She didn't see an audit. She saw a checkbook. She saw another zero added to her bank account. "Oh, Conrad," she gushed, reaching out to touch my arm with her manicured hand. "We are so glad you came. The twins will be so excited. They are in the sunroom opening presents. Did you bring something for them?" She gestured unsubtly to the briefcase. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. It was the hand that had poured water for my granddaughter the night before. It was the hand that had pointed to the basement door. "I brought exactly what this family deserves," I said coldly. The guests were whispering now. They could sense the tension. It was thick in the air, vibrating like a high-tension wire. These were Shark's two wealthy people who understood power dynamics. They knew this wasn't a happy family reunion. They were watching a predator corner its prey. Justin sensed he was losing control of the narrative. He needed to get me out of the center of the room. "Why don't we go to the study, Conrad?" he said, his smile starting to crack at the edges, showing the desperation underneath. "We can talk business later. Right now, let's just enjoy the party. There are some people I want you to meet. I am not here to meet your friends." "Justin," I said, "I am here to clarify some financial matters. Right here. Now." Justin's eyes darted around the room. He was trapped. If he made a scene, he would look unstable in front of his investors. If he let me speak, he risked exposure. He was trying to calculate the damage, trying to figure out the path of least resistance. "Conrad. Please," he hissed, his voice dropping to a plea. "Not in front of everyone. Think of Mia." That was the wrong thing to say. I looked at him, and for the first time I let the anger show. Just a flash of it. A spark of the inferno that was burning inside me. "I am thinking of Mia," I said. "That is the only reason I am standing here." I took a step forward, forcing him to take a step back. The power dynamic shifted physically. He was retreating. I was advancing. "Where is she, Justin?" I asked loudly. "Where is my granddaughter? She is around," he stammered. "She is playing." "Is she?" I asked. "Or is she downstairs?" The word hung in the air. Downstairs. It was innocuous to the guests, but to Justin it was a bomb. He knew that I knew. His face went gray. I realized then that he hadn't told anyone about Mia. To these people, she probably didn't exist. Or if she did, she was just a footnote, a shadow in the background of his new, perfect life. I walked past him. I walked straight to the center of the room, next to the towering birthday cake that cost more than most people make in a month. I placed my briefcase on the table, pushing aside a tray of untouched caviar. The room went deathly silent. Every eye was on the leather case. I clicked the latches. The sound was sharp and loud in the quiet room. Click, click. I didn't open it yet. I looked up at the crowd. I looked at the investors in their expensive suits. I looked at the women in their designer dresses. "You are all here to celebrate success," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "You are here to celebrate a man who seems to have it all. A beautiful house, a beautiful family, a thriving future." I paused. I saw Justin starting to move toward me, his hand reaching out as if to stop a bullet. But in my line of work, I continued staring straight at Justin. "I have learned that the books always have to balance. And sometimes what looks like success is actually just a very long, very expensive lie. Conrad, "Stop!" Justin shouted, losing his composure entirely. But it was too late. I flipped the lid of the briefcase open. Justin stared into the open briefcase. For a long, agonizing moment, he did not move. He did not breathe. The smile that had been plastered on his face for the last 3 hours finally slipped, sliding off like wet paint to reveal the gray, trembling fear underneath. He looked at the blue legal covers. He looked at the bold black letters stamped across the top document. Writ of seizure. Beneath that, in red ink, immediate eviction order. He reached out a hand that was shaking so violently his cufflinks rattled against his wrist. He picked up the first document. He read the first line, then the second. His eyes widened until they looked like they might pop out of his skull. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. But no sound came out. "Read it, Justin," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the dead silence of the room it carried to every corner. It bounced off the high ceilings and the expensive art. "Read it to your guests. They are investors, aren't they? They believe in transparency." "Conrad." Justin whispered, his voice cracking. This is a mistake. We can talk about this in private. Please." "There is no privacy left," I said. "You sold your privacy when you used my money to buy those shoes on your feet. You sold it when you used my daughter's trust fund to pay for this catering." I turned to the crowd. I looked at the man in the navy blazer, the venture capitalist Justin had been courting. "You, sir," I said, addressing him directly. "You look like a man who understands numbers. My son-in-law here has probably told you that he is a successful entrepreneur, that he is sitting on a gold mine." The man blinked, looking uncomfortable. He took a half step away from Justin. Well, I continued walking slowly around the table, circling Justin like a shark. "Let me show you his balance sheet, because I am his auditor. And I have been auditing this family for 6 years." I reached into the briefcase and pulled out the bank statements. I held them up. "Exhibit A," I announced. $480,000. That is the principal amount I have transferred to this household since my daughter died. It was marked as a loan for the care and education of my granddaughter, Mia. I threw the papers onto the cake table. They scattered some landing in the frosting. "Justin here," I said, pointing a finger at him that felt like a loaded gun, decided to reallocate those funds. He didn't spend it on math tutors. He didn't spend it on summer camps. I turned and pointed at Tanya. She was clutching the twin girl, her face pale as a sheet. "He spent it on her," I said. "He spent it on a condo in the city. He spent it on diamond jewelry. He spent it on a leased Range Rover." "That is a lie," Tanya shrieked, finding her voice. "Justin, tell him it is a lie." "It is all in the ledger," Tanya, I said coldly. "I have the receipts. I matched the transaction dates to your Instagram posts. Every time you showed off a new bag, my granddaughter missed a meal. Every time you went to a spa, the heat in this house was turned down to save money." I looked back at the investors. "You are eating stolen food, gentlemen. That shrimp cocktail, that champagne, it was paid for with money embezzled from a trust fund set up for an orphan." Murmurs broke out in the room. Disgust. Shock. People started putting their glasses down on the nearest tables. They started backing away from Justin, as if he were contagious. "Conrad." "Stop," Justin pleaded. He grabbed my arm. I shook him off with a force that surprised even me. "Do not touch me," I snarled. I reached back into the briefcase. "Exhibit B," I said, pulling out the photo of the twins from the hotel lobby. I held it up for the room to see. "Look at this beautiful family," I said. "A loving father, a devoted partner, and 2 healthy, happy 5-year-old children." I walked over to the twins. They looked up at me confused, sensing the tension, but too young to understand it. 5 years old, I repeated. I turned to Justin. "My daughter died 6 years ago, Justin. She was dying for 2 years before that. She was in a hospital bed, losing her hair, losing her strength, waiting for you to come visit. The room was so quiet you could hear the wind outside. Do the math, I said to the crowd. Look at these children. Look at the timeline. While my daughter was taking her last breaths, this man was not grieving. He was breeding. He was building a replacement family. He was lying to her face while she lay on her deathbed. Gasps of horror rippled through the crowd. The women covered their mouths. The man in the navy blazer looked at Justin with pure revulsion. "You are a monster," a woman whispered from the back. "But I am not done," I said. I was relentless. I was not going to leave him a shred of dignity. I pointed to the floor. "Exhibit C," I said. "The asset itself." This house, Justin, I said his name, tasting like poison in my mouth. "You told these people you were thinking of selling. You told them you wanted to move on." I picked up the eviction order. "You can't sell what you don't own. This house belongs to the trust. It belongs to Mia. And as of 10 o'clock this morning, a judge has signed this order removing you as trustee. You are here on a guest pass, Justin, and the pass has expired." I shoved the eviction notice into his chest. He stumbled back, clutching the paper. "You have 30 minutes, I said. 30 minutes to pack your personal effects. Not the furniture, not the art, not the electronics. Those were bought with trust money. They stay. You can take your clothes, you can take your mistress, and you can take your lies, but you are leaving this house today. But the party." Justin stammered, looking around at the ruined celebration. "The party is over," I said. Then I played my final card, the one that would ensure he didn't just lose the house but his freedom. "And Justin," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Before you pack, I have one question. Where is Mia?" He froze. His eyes darted to the hallway door. She is in her room," he lied. I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. I connected it to the Bluetooth speakers that had been playing the string quartet music. "Let us ask the house," I said. I pressed play on the video I had recorded last night. The video of the basement. The sound of my breathing filled the room, then the creak of the door. The beam of the flashlight dancing on the screen of the 85-inch television above the fireplace. The crowd watched in horror as the camera panned over the dirty mattress, the bucket of urine, the bowl of congealed macaroni. "This is where he keeps her," I narrated to the crowd, my voice live contrasting with the silence of the video. "While you eat lobster, the owner of this house sleeps on concrete. While you drink wine, she drinks from a bathroom tap." The video ended on the image of the defaced photo of Sarah. "Justin Pierce," I said, turning to him one last time. "You are not just a thief, you are a child abuser, and you are done." Justin looked around the room. He was looking for an ally. He was looking for anyone to tell him this wasn't happening. But he found only a sea of enemies. The investors were already reaching for their coats. The women were looking at him with hatred. Tanya had backed away from him, clutching the twins, realizing that the ship had not just sunk, it had exploded. I can explain," Justin tried to say. It is discipline. She is a difficult child." "Shut up," the man in the navy blazer shouted. "Just shut up." I checked my watch. "Your 30 minutes started 5 minutes ago, Justin, and I suggest you hurry." "Because I didn't just bring a lawyer." I pointed out the window. Blue lights were flashing in the driveway. The sheriff's car had pulled up right behind the Bentleys and the Porsches. "I brought a ride for you," I said. Justin's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the chair behind him, the eviction notice fluttering to the floor like a white flag of surrender. I picked up my briefcase. I didn't look at him again. I walked past the stunned guests, past the ruined cake, and headed toward the hallway. I had one more thing to do. I had to go to the basement. I had to unlock the door, and I had to tell my granddaughter that the monsters were gone. I turned my back on him. It was the ultimate insult. In the business world, turning your back means the deal is done, the negotiation is over, and the other party has ceased to exist. I walked toward the hallway door, my footsteps echoing on the marble, intent on getting to the basement. But a rat cornered in a trap does not beg for mercy. It bites. I heard a scramble of movement behind me. A chair was knocked over. Glass shattered. Then a hand clamped onto my shoulder. It wasn't the firm, confident grip of the son-in-law from 5 minutes ago. It was a claw. It was desperate, violent, and trembling with adrenaline. "You are not going anywhere," Justin hissed. I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I looked at the hand on my shoulder. His knuckles were white. His fingernails were digging into my expensive suit fabric. "Remove your hand, Justin," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Or I will have the sheriff remove it for you. And he won't be gentle." Justin spun me around. His face was inches from mine. The transformation was terrifying. The handsome, charming host was gone. In his place was a sweating, manic stranger. His eyes were bloodshot, the pupils dilated with panic. A vein in his forehead was throbbing visibly. He looked like a man who had just watched his life burn down and was looking for someone to throw into the fire with him. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin me?" he spat, spittle flying from his mouth. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my investors, in front of my friends?" "Your friends are leaving, Justin," I said, glancing over his shoulder. It was true. The room was clearing out. The venture capitalists, the socialites, the people he had spent years cultivating, they were grabbing their coats and fleeing the toxicity. They didn't want to be subpoenaed. They didn't want to be associated with a child abuser. Even Tanya was backing toward the door, dragging the confused twins with her, her eyes fixed on the exit sign. "Let them go," Justin screamed, not even looking at them. "I don't care about them. I care about what you owe me." "I owe you nothing but a prison sentence," I replied. He laughed. It was a jagged, broken sound. "Oh, you owe me, Conrad. You owe me for 6 years of putting up with your depressing, broken daughter. You owe me for taking care of her brat. And you are going to pay." He leaned in closer, dropping his voice so the sheriff standing by the entrance wouldn't hear the details. He thought he was being clever. He thought he still had a card to play. "You forgot one thing, old man," he whispered, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You have the money. You have the house, but I have the girl." I stood perfectly still. "I am her father," Justin said, tapping his chest. "I am her legal guardian. That eviction notice, it kicks me out of the house." "Fine. I will leave. But Mia comes with me." He saw the flicker of reaction in my eyes. He thought it was fear. He pressed his advantage. "That's right," he sneered. "The law is on my side. Unless you can prove I am unfit, and good luck doing that, with a few blurry videos, she is mine. And if I leave today, Conrad, I am taking her far away. Maybe we will move to Alaska. Maybe we will go to South America. You will never see her again. You will never know if she is eating. You will never know if she is warm." He paused, letting the threat sink in. He was weaponizing my love for my granddaughter. He was holding a 10-year-old girl like a gun to my head. But he continued, his voice taking on an oily, wheedling tone. "It doesn't have to be that way. We are businessmen, right? We can make a deal." "What do you want, Justin?" I asked, keeping my face impassive. $10 million, he said. The number came out fast, greedy. $10 million transferred to an offshore account. Today. You do that, and I will sign over full custody. I will walk away. You get the girl. I get a fresh start. Everyone wins. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip. I saw the cheap ambition. He was trying to sell his own daughter. He was putting a price tag on her flesh and blood. He truly believed he held the leverage. He thought that because he had the title of father, he had the power. He didn't understand that he was already dead. He was just a corpse that hadn't stopped moving yet. "You are trying to blackmail me," I stated flatly. "I am negotiating a severance package," he corrected, smirking. "Think about it, Conrad. 10 million is a drop in the bucket for you. Is Mia worth it, or are you too cheap to save her?" He stepped back, crossing his arms, looking smug. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought he had found the one thing I couldn't audit. I looked past him toward the sheriff, who was now walking slowly across the room, his hand resting on his belt. "You made a miscalculation, Justin," I said softly. "What is that?" he challenged. "You assume you have assets to negotiate with," I said. "But you don't. You are bankrupt. And I don't mean morally. I mean literally." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the final document. The one I hadn't shown him yet. "You want to talk about money? Let's talk about the $480,000. Justin rolled his eyes. "We already covered that. You said it was a loan. I say it was a gift. My lawyer will tie that up in court for years." "Your lawyer won't touch this case," I said. "Because you didn't read the memo line on the checks, Justin. And you certainly didn't read the loan agreement you signed electronically every time you accepted a transfer." I watched confusion cloud his face. "What agreement?" he asked. I took a step forward, closing the distance again. "Every transfer I sent was secured, Justin. Secured against your personal assets. Secured against your future earnings. And most importantly, secured with a confession of judgment clause." His face went white. He knew what that meant. "That means I don't need a trial to collect," I explained, my voice like a hammer driving the last nail into his coffin. "It means the moment you defaulted, which you did the second you used trust funds for personal gain, I became the owner of everything you have." I pointed to the driveway. "Your car, it's mine. Your bank accounts, frozen 10 minutes ago. That watch on your wrist, mine. Even the clothes on your back, Justin. Technically, I own your shoes." Justin stumbled back, looking down at his feet as if the floor was opening up. "So you see," I continued, relentless, "you can't take Mia anywhere. You can't even buy a bus ticket. You have $0. You have zero credit. You are destitute." And as for custody, I nodded to the sheriff, who was now standing right behind him. "Extortion is a felony, Justin. Attempting to sell a child is human trafficking. You just confessed to both in front of a law enforcement officer." Justin spun around. He saw the sheriff. He saw the handcuffs. The beast let out a sound, a high, thin whimper of total defeat. The trap had snapped shut, and there was no way out. Justin wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. His eyes darted between the sheriff standing by the door and the stack of documents in my hand. He was cornered, but the arrogance of a narcissist is a hard thing to kill. He straightened his spine, trying to salvage some shred of authority in front of his mistress and the few remaining staff members who were witnessing his collapse. "You are bluffing, Conrad," he said, his voice gaining a fragile strength. "You can threaten me with jail, you can show me videos, but you cannot rewrite financial history. You sent that money, you sent checks, you sent wire transfers. For 6 years, you played the generous grandfather." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "In the eyes of the law, those were gifts," he declared. "You cannot ask for a gift back just because you are angry. My lawyer will tear this apart. It is a civil matter." "It is," he said, she said. "And no judge is going to make a grieving father repay $500,000 of charity." I looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He really didn't get it. He thought he was playing checkers while I had been playing three-dimensional chess for 6 years. "It is not a civil matter, Justin," I said softly. "And it is certainly not charity." I walked over to the table where the ruined cake sat. I cleared a space and laid out a single sheet of paper. It was a blown-up image of a digital banking confirmation. "Do you remember how I sent the money, Justin?" I asked. He frowned. You wired it. Direct deposit. To the household account." "Exactly," I said. "And do you remember what you had to do to accept the funds the very first time we set up the transfer?" He hesitated. I clicked accept. Like anyone does. "Yes," I said. "You clicked accept. You clicked a button that said, I agree to the terms and conditions of this transfer." I took a step closer to him. "Did you read the terms, Justin?" He laughed nervously. "Nobody reads the terms, Conrad. It is boilerplate." I smiled. It was the coldest smile I have ever worn. "I write my own terms, Justin." I pointed to the paper on the table. Every single transfer I initiated was sent through a secured lending platform, not a standard consumer bank wire. When you clicked accept, you weren't just receiving money. You were digitally signing a promissory note. I watched the color drain from his face as the words sank in. "A promissory note?" I repeated. "Specifically, a demand note secured by a uniform commercial code filing." "I don't know what that means," he whispered. "I know you don't," I said. "That is why you are dangerous. You are ignorant and greedy. But let me explain it to you in simple English. It means that every dollar I sent you, the $80,000 a year, the emergency funds, the renovation costs, was legally classified as a loan. A loan with a compounding interest rate of 5%. I pulled out a calculator from my pocket. I didn't need it. I had done the math in my head 1,000 times, but the theater of it was important. I wanted him to see the numbers. $480,000 in principal, I said, punching the keys. Plus 6 years of compound interest. Plus late fees for the misuse of funds, which triggers a default clause. I turned the calculator screen toward him. "You don't owe me $500,000, Justin. You owe me $642,000. And that debt is due today." He stared at the number. It was more money than he had ever seen in his life. It was a life sentence of debt. You can't enforce this," he stammered. "I spent it. It is gone. I don't have $600,000. "I know," I said calmly. "That is where the second part of the agreement comes in." I flipped to the next page of the document. The Confession of Judgment. I read aloud. "By accepting these funds, the borrower agrees that in the event of default, the lender has the right to seize any and all personal assets without a court trial." I looked up at him. "Do you understand what without a court trial means, Justin? It means I don't have to sue you. I don't have to argue with your lawyer. You already signed away your rights. You signed them away 6 years ago because you were too lazy to read the fine print and too greedy to question where the money came from." I turned to the sheriff. "Officer," I said, "as the lien holder of all property within this residence, I am authorizing the seizure of all non-essential assets." I pointed to Justin's wrist. "That Rolex," I said. "It is a Submariner. Retail value $12,000. Take it off, Justin. It goes toward the interest." He clutched his wrist. "No," he gasped. "This was a gift from me," I finished. "Indirectly. Take it off." He hesitated. The sheriff took a step forward, his hand resting on his baton. Justin fumbled with the clasp, his fingers trembling, and laid the watch on the table. I pointed to his pocket. "The keys to the Range Rover," I said. "The lease is in your name, but the down payment was mine. The vehicle is collateral. Hand them over." Justin slammed the keys onto the table. Tears were streaming down his face now. Angry, impotent tears. "Is that it?" he screamed. "Do you want the shirt off my back too?" I looked at his suit. It was Italian wool. "Custom fit." "No," I said. "I don't want your clothes. I don't want anything that has touched your skin, but I want you to understand your position. I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he and Tanya could hear. Tanya, who was currently trying to make herself invisible against the wall. You are not just broke, Justin. You are negative. You will never get a loan again. You will never get a credit card. You will never buy a house. Every paycheck you ever earn for the rest of your life will be garnished until you pay me back every single cent. I looked at Tanya. And you, I said. I hope you love him for his personality, because the ATM is out of order, permanently. Tanya looked at Justin. She looked at the watch on the table. She looked at the eviction notice. And then, with the survival instinct of a rat on a sinking ship, she made her choice. I didn't know she said, her voice high and fearful. She looked at me. Conrad, I swear, I didn't know he was stealing from you. He told me he was an investor. He told me the money was his. Tanya, shut up. Justin roared. No, you shut up, she screamed back, grabbing the twins' hands. You liar. You told me we were rich. You told me this was your house. She turned to me. Can I go? I just want to take my kids and go. I looked at the twins. They were crying. It wasn't their fault. Go, I said, but leave the jewelry, the bracelet, the earrings. Those belong to the trust. Tanya didn't hesitate. She unclasped the diamond bracelet, the one bought with Mia's camp money, and threw it on the table next to the Rolex. She didn't even say goodbye to Justin. She dragged the twins out the front door, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage of his life. Justin watched them go. He looked small. He looked hollow. You took everything, he whispered. I took nothing, I corrected him. I simply balanced the books. You took everything from yourself the day you decided to treat my granddaughter like a prisoner in her own home. I picked up the keys to the Range Rover. The sheriff is going to escort you off the property now, Justin. You have 5 minutes to grab a coat. If you are not off the premises in 5 minutes, the charge upgrades to trespassing. I turned away from him. I was done with the numbers. I was done with the revenge. Now I had to be a grandfather. I walked toward the hallway door. Behind me, I heard the heavy, defeated footsteps of a man being led away in handcuffs, but I didn't look back. My eyes were fixed on the basement door. I unlocked it. I opened it. Mia. I called out, my voice breaking for the first time that day. It is Grandpa. I am coming down. The silence in the hallway was short-lived. It was broken not by a scream, but by a vibration, a low, persistent buzzing against the mahogany table where Justin had dropped his phone in the chaos. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It wasn't a call. It was a notification. Then another. Then another. It sounded like a swarm of angry hornets trapped inside the device. Justin stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. He wiped his tear-stained face and reached for it. His hand was trembling so badly, he almost dropped it again. He swiped the screen. I watched his eyes scan the alerts. I knew exactly what they were. I had timed the execution of the liens to coincide perfectly with the sheriff's arrival. What did you do? Justin whispered, his voice barely audible. He tapped on an app. It was his Chase banking app. I saw the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse standing upright. 0, he gasped. It says 0, he tapped frantically. My savings, my investment account. It is all 0. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a primal panic. Where is my money, Conrad? That was my money. I earned that. You earned nothing, I said, calm as a frozen lake. That account was fed by the stipend. The stipend was a loan. The loan is in default. The bank is simply exercising its right to offset. The phone rang then. A real call. Justin answered it on speakerphone, his thumb slipping on the glass. Mr. Pierce, a robotic female voice filled the hallway. This is the fraud department at American Express. We are calling to notify you that your Platinum card has been suspended due to a freeze order placed by the primary lien holder. I am not suspended, Justin screamed at the phone. It is a mistake. I have a limit of 50,000. Your current balance is negative 600,000. The agent on the line corrected him, her voice devoid of sympathy. Please cut up your card immediately. Any attempt to use it will be flagged as fraud. Have a nice day. Click. He barely had time to lower the phone before it rang again. This time it was the leasing company for the BMW he kept in the city for Tanya. Then it was the utility company. It was a digital avalanche. Every financial pillar he had built his fake life on was crumbling in real time. He was watching his identity dissolve into pixels. He wasn't Justin Pierce, the wealthy entrepreneur, anymore. He was just a social security number with a red flag attached to it. Then came the sound from outside. It was a heavy, grinding mechanical noise. The sound of diesel engines and hydraulic gears. It vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the crystal chandelier above our heads. Justin ran to the window. He clawed at the curtains, ripping them aside. No, he wailed. No, no, no. I didn't need to look. I knew what was happening. I had scheduled the pickup for 12:30. Outside, a flatbed tow truck with the logo Asset Recovery Services was backing into the driveway. It didn't care about the manicured lawn. The driver, a man with a thick neck and a cigarette dangling from his lip, was backing straight up to the Range Rover. He jumped out, dragging heavy chains across the pavement. The metal scraped against the asphalt, a harsh, ugly sound that cut through the elegance of the neighborhood. "Stop him!" Justin screamed at the sheriff. "Arrest him! He is stealing my car!" The sheriff didn't move. He just adjusted his belt and looked out the window. "That is a repossession order, son," the sheriff said. "It is all legal." I checked the paperwork myself. Justin watched helplessly as the driver hooked the chains onto the bumper of the Range Rover. The winch whined. The car, the symbol of his status, the vehicle he used to shuttle his mistress around while my granddaughter sat in the dark, was lifted into the air. It tilted at an awkward angle, looking like a dead animal being dragged away. Justin banged on the glass. "Hey, that is my car. Put it down." The driver didn't even look up. He secured the wheels, climbed back into the cab, and revved the engine. Black smoke puffed out of the exhaust stack. And just like that, it was gone. The driveway was empty. The oil stain where the car had been was the only thing left. Justin turned back to me. He was hyperventilating. His chest was heaving. He looked at his empty wrist where the Rolex used to be. He looked at the empty driveway. He looked at the phone that kept buzzing with more bad news. He was naked. I had stripped him of every layer of armor he possessed. "How am I supposed to live?" he whispered, his voice broken. "I have no cash. I have no cards. I have no car." I walked past him. I stopped at the basement door and put my hand on the knob. I looked back at him one last time. "There is a bus stop 3 miles down the road, Justin. I suggest you start walking. Because if you are still here when I come back up with Mia, the sheriff is going to put you in the back of his car. And unlike the Range Rover, that ride doesn't have heated seats." I turned the key. The lock clicked. And for the first time in 6 years, the door to the dungeon swung open. The sound of the basement door unlocking was the only thing I wanted to hear, but behind me the world of Justin Pierce was ending in a cacophony of justice. I had barely turned the key when the front door burst open again. It wasn't more guests. It was the backup I had requested. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the foyer, their presence filling the space with the heavy, undeniable authority of the law. The sheriff, who had been standing guard, finally made his move. He didn't walk toward Justin. He marched. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt, the metal glinting under the chandelier. Justin Pierce, the sheriff, announced, his voice booming over the whimpers of the twins. "You are under arrest for felony child endangerment fraud and unlawful imprisonment." Justin tried to run. It was a pathetic, instinctive attempt. He scrambled toward the kitchen, maybe thinking he could get to the back door, maybe thinking he could disappear into the woodwork. But he didn't make it 3 steps. The officers were on him instantly. They slammed him against the wall, his face pressing into the expensive wallpaper he claimed to own. I heard the snap of the cuffs. It was a sharp, final sound, the sound of a ledger being closed. "You can't do this," Justin screamed, thrashing against the officers. "I am a father. I have rights. Look at this house. Do I look like a criminal? You look like a suspect," the sheriff said, spinning him around. "And you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." By the door, Tanya was trying to herd the twins out, her face a mask of terrified indifference. She wasn't looking at Justin. She was looking for an exit. "Ma'am, stay right there," one of the officers called out. "Me?" Tanya shrieked, clutching her designer bag. "I didn't do anything. I don't even live here. I am just a guest." "We have the video footage, ma'am," the sheriff said calmly. "We have footage from a camera hidden in a teddy bear. It shows you denying food to a minor. It shows you verbally assaulting a child. In the state of Massachusetts, being an accomplice to abuse is just as heavy a charge as the abuse itself." Tanya dropped her bag. Her hands went up trembling. The twins began to wail, a high-pitched sound of confusion and fear. "Child Protective Services is on the way for them," the sheriff added gently. "They will be taken care of. But you, ma'am, are coming with us. I didn't watch them get dragged out. I didn't need to see Justin being shoved into the back of a cruiser, his head bowed to avoid the cameras of the neighbors who had gathered outside. I didn't need to see the ruin of his reputation. I had already audited that account. It was bankrupt. My focus was on the dark stairwell in front of me. I stepped onto the first wooden plank. The air down here was still freezing, a stark contrast to the heated drama upstairs. "Mia," I called out softly. There was no answer, just the scuttling of a mouse in the corner. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the plywood wall, the padlock I had broken the night before, and the mattress on the floor. She was there. Mia was curled into a ball in the corner of the room, her knees pulled up to her chest, her face buried in her arms. She was wearing that same dirty t-shirt. She was shaking, but she wasn't making a sound. She had learned that making noise only brought punishment. "Mia," I said, my voice cracking. "It is Grandpa." She froze. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were wide, adjusted to the dark. She looked at me, then she looked past me toward the stairs, expecting to see her father's silhouette. Expecting the belt. Expecting the anger. "He is gone, honey," I whispered, kneeling down on the dirty concrete. I didn't care about my suit. I didn't care about the dust. He is gone. He can never hurt you again. The bad lady is gone too. It is just us. She stared at me for a long heartbeat. She was processing the words, trying to fit them into a world where she had been a prisoner for so long. "Gone," she whispered. Her voice was rusty, unused. "Forever," I promised. I hold out my hand. She didn't take my hand. She launched herself at me. It hit me with the force of a collision. Her small, thin arms wrapped around my neck, squeezing with a strength I didn't know she had. She buried her face in my shoulder, and then the dam broke. She began to sob. Not the quiet, stifled crying of a victim, but the loud, heaving sobs of someone who has been holding their breath for years. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her off the cold floor, holding her tight against my chest. I rocked her back and forth. I felt her tears soaking into my jacket. I felt her ribs through the thin fabric of her shirt. "I am sorry," I whispered into her hair. "I am so sorry I didn't see it. I am sorry I was just a checkbook. I am sorry I left you here. Grandpa, she choked out. You came back. You really came back. I will always come back, I said. I stood up, lifting her effortlessly. She was too light. Far too light for a 10-year-old. We are leaving this place, Mia. We are never coming back to this house. We are going to a hotel with a big bathtub and room service. You can order anything you want. You can have lobster. You can have ice cream. You can have the whole menu. She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with dirty knuckles. Even the remote control, she asked, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I laughed. It was a wet, choked sound. Yes. Even the remote control. I carried her up the stairs. We emerged from the darkness of the basement into the bright, sunlit hallway. The police were gone. The party guests were gone. The house was silent. Mia looked around. She looked at the sunlight streaming through the windows. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air that didn't smell of mildew and fear. She rested her head on my shoulder and closed her eyes. Let's go home, Grandpa, she said. And for the first time in 6 years, I knew exactly where that was. 6 months later. The kitchen of the new house was nothing like the mausoleum in Wellesley. This kitchen was messy. There was flour on the counter. There was a half-finished puzzle on the dining table. The walls were painted a bright, cheerful yellow, a color Maya had picked out herself. I sat at the island, drinking my coffee, watching the backyard through the sliding glass doors. It was summer now. The grass was green, and in the middle of the lawn, a girl was running. Mia was laughing. She was chasing a golden retriever puppy we had adopted last week. She looked different. Her cheeks were rounder. Her hair, now shiny and clean, bounced as she ran. She was wearing a bright blue sundress, and there was a Band-Aid on her knee from climbing a tree. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was just a 10-year-old girl. I looked down at the file on the counter. It was the final report from Harrison Stone. Justin had pleaded guilty. Confronted with the mountain of financial evidence and the video of the abuse, his lawyer had advised him to take a deal. 15 years. No parole for at least 10. The judge had called him a parasite during sentencing. Tanya had received 5 years for child endangerment and conspiracy. The twins were with her parents in Ohio. I had set up a small anonymous education fund for them. They were innocent. I wouldn't let the sins of the father destroy another generation. The house in Wellesley had been sold. The proceeds were in a new trust, one that I managed directly with Mia involved in every decision. I picked up the silver picture frame that sat next to the coffee maker. It was the photo I had rescued from the basement. I had replaced the glass. I couldn't erase the marker scribbles on Sarah's face completely, but I had cleaned it as best as I could. I looked at my daughter. In the photo, she was smiling. I failed you once, Sarah, I whispered to the frame. I let money blind me. I let grief make me lazy. But I fixed it. The books are balanced. The debt is paid. Mia ran into the kitchen, breathless and flushed. Grandpa, she shouted. Barnaby stole my shoe. She pointed to the puppy who was happily chewing on a sneaker in the grass. I smiled. I stood up and put the file in the drawer. I closed it. I locked it. I am coming, Mia, I called out. I walked out into the sun. I wasn't the auditor anymore. I wasn't the bank. I was just Grandpa. And that was the only title that mattered. What did I learn from all of this? I learned that money is a tool, but it is not a substitute for presence. For 6 years, I thought writing checks made me a good grandfather. I was wrong. It just made me a target. I learned that evil often wears a smiling face and expensive clothes, while truth hides in the silence of a frightened child. Real family is not defined by blood. Blood gave Mia a father who locked her in a dark basement. Love gave her a grandfather who was willing to burn down his own world to break down that door. Never let your generosity blind you to reality. Trust is precious, but as any good auditor will tell you, trust but always verify. Because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to watch the most. If Mia's story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more stories of justice and resilience to light. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect a loved one from their own family? Let me know your story below. I'll see you in the next video.